Have you ever noticed how sometimes your day changes completely without anything external actually happened? The body is in the same place, the people are the same, the world has not transformed, and yet something inside you suddenly weighs down or brightens. Imagine this scene. You walk in silence, maybe heading home, maybe just looking at the floor. The mind is full but formless, mixed thoughts, emotions you can't name. And then, for an instant, something changes. No, because someone said something important. Not because you solved a problem, but because a simple sentence crossed his consciousness, like an unexpected breeze on a day muffled. It's strange to admit, but often we are not the ones in control of our state emotional. We are crossed by it, like leaves blown by the wind. What if I told you that, a long time ago, some cultures realized this so clarity that created simple, almost invisible, ways to change the internal state without fighting? It's not a complicated technique. Does not require extreme concentration. It does not depend on belief, effort, or willpower. In fact, the more you try to make it work, the less it works. There is a short sentence, so simple that the rational mind usually ignores it. But when she is heard in the right way, at the right time, something curious happens. The body relaxes before thought understands. Breathing changes before logic approves. The mood rearranges itself without asking permission. Maybe you felt something like this when you hear the sound of rain, or when entering a silent forest, or watching the water running without rushing, without purpose. There is a kind of wisdom that doesn't explain. It adjusts. Not convincing. Agree. Don't push. Reposition. And this phrase comes from exactly that place. From the space between the visible and the invisible. From point where human beings stop trying to control and just realize. If you feel like lately your emotions seem to speed up on their own, if sometimes you wake up tired without knowing exactly why, if there is a feeling of misalignment that is difficult to explain. So maybe this video didn't come to you by chance. Allow yourself to listen until the end. Not as someone looking for an answer, but as someone listening to the distant sound of something familiar. If you feel like there is something invisible influencing your days, stay here. This journey starts now. And before we move forward, a question that needs to be answered. Why would a sentence, just a few words, be able to change someone's mood? Someone so quickly without any effort? What happens inside us before we even think? Before any thoughts arise? Before you decide whether something is good or bad? Right or wrong? Wrong. Your body has already responded. This happens all the time, and almost no one notices. You wake up and for no clear reason, your chest feels tight. Or you enter a place and feel a sudden discomfort, even without knowing why. Sometimes all it takes is a message, a crossed look, an out-of-place silence, and the mood changes. From 0 to 100, or from 100 to 0. It's not drama, it's not weakness, it's functioning. Human beings like to believe that they think first and feel later. But the real order is often the opposite. We feel, then we explain. There is an internal field where emotions are born before words, a silent territory where tension, lightness, fear, and calm organize themselves, like the weather forms in the sky, without asking anyone for permission. Note, when you enter a heavy environment, your body notices it before your mind does. When someone is angry, you feel it before you understand it. When something is out of place, it's not a thought that warns you. It's a sensation. This invisible emotional state is like the water you are immersed in. If she is agitated, everything seems difficult. If you are calm, even problems breathe differently. The problem is that modern life has taught us to ignore this field. The mind has been placed in absolute command. Feeling has become something secondary, uncomfortable, disruptive. So we do what we learned. We try to think positive, control emotions, push sensations away, act as if the body were a detail. But emotions don't obey direct orders. The more you try to control them, the more they resist. The more you fight an internal state, the more it intensifies. This is why many people are tired without having made any physical effort. Fatigue doesn't come from the body. It comes from constant internal tension, from the continuous attempt to mentally adjust to something that requires another form of care. Here is an essential point. The emotional mood does not change with arguments. It changes with state. You don't calm down because someone explains something logical to you. You calm down when your body recognizes safety. You don't relax because you understand a concept. You relax when something reorganizes your internal rhythm. Therefore, certain experiences change everything without explanation. The sound of water, the wind in your face, a deep silence, or a phrase said in the right tone. These experiences do not pass through the rational mind. They enter straight into the invisible field where mood is formed. And that's exactly where the secret lies. The phrase you will come across does not try to convince you of anything. She doesn't argue with her thoughts. It does not require change, effort, or control. It just repositions you internally. As if something said to your body, you don't need to fight now. You can let go. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. And when the body listens to this, for real, the emotion changes, before logic, before the explanation. But why does it work so fast? Why do some words manage to touch this invisible field while others pass through, direct, and most importantly, where does this sensitivity come from to perceive and influence the emotional state without strength? There is something that nature understands perfectly, but that we unlearn with time. Time. Not everything needs to be explained for it to work. Observe a forest. Nothing there tries to convince anything. The tree does not force growth. The river doesn't argue with the stone. The wind does not ask permission to pass. And yet, everything fits. When you enter a natural environment, something about you changes before you even realize it. Breathing slows down. The shoulders relax. Thought loses urgency. Nobody taught you that. The body simply remembers. There is a type of intelligence that does not speak in words. It manifests itself as atmosphere, like feeling, as presence. You feel when a place is light, feel when it's heavy, feel when something is in balance or not. This perception does not come from the logical mind. It comes from an older field, quieter, more attentive. For a long time, human beings lived in direct dialogue with this invisible person, not as something mystical or distant, but as part of everyday life. The sound, the space, the rhythm, the silence, everything communicated. There was no need to dominate. There was a habit of listening. As the centuries passed, we moved away from this. We create too much noise, too many explanations, too much speed, and in this excess, we lose sensitivity. Today, we try to resolve emotional states with more stimulation, more information, more distraction, more effort. But the invisible does not respond to haste. He responds to presence. That's why certain simple experiences rearrange everything. Sit near the water, walking without destination. Watch the sky change color at the end of the day. None of this solves concrete problems, but all of this changes the internal state, and that changes how problems are felt. Nature doesn't try to improve you. It just creates the right environment to get you back into your original rhythm. And here is an essential detail. Emotional mood is not something isolated within you. He is in constant dialogue with the environment. When the environment is aggressive, the body contracts. When it's safe, it opens. For a long time, some traditions have realized that words are also environment. The tone, the rhythm, the intention behind them. A sentence is not just a set of sounds. It carries a state. Some words are tense. Others relieve it. Some squeeze. Others let go. You've felt this without consciously realizing it. A sentence said at the wrong time weighs on you for days. Another simple one completely changes your internal posture. This happens because certain words do not speak to the mind. They speak with the same field that responds to wind, water, and silence. When said correctly, they explain nothing. They adjust, as if the body said, "Ah, now I understand where I am." And this understanding is not rational. It's sensorial. It's immediate. The phrase we are approaching comes from exactly this principle. It was not created to convince. It was created to align. But before revealing it, there is something even more important to understand. Why have modern human beings lost so much contact with this invisible field? And what happens when, for a few seconds, he finally stops resisting? This is what needs to be crossed before the revelation. And this journey begins now. There is a specific moment when something simple stops being common and becomes transformer. It's not when you understand with your mind. That's when the body recognizes it. So far, we have spoken of invisible states, of sensations that precede thought, of how nature adjusts effortlessly. Now, all of this converges to a silent point, the phrase. But before you listen to it, I need to warn you about something important. This phrase doesn't work if it's treated as a technique. She doesn't respond well to expectations. She doesn't respond in a hurry. It kicks in when you stop trying. Imagine yourself paused for a moment, not trying to improve anything, not looking for any solution, just present. Now notice your body, not the judgment on him, the body itself, the breath, the posture, the internal weight that maybe you didn't even know you were carrying. It is in this space that the sentence finds its place. It's not long. It is not poetic in the common sense. It's not impressive in shape. The impact is not in what she says, but in what it allows to release. The sentence is this: everything is exactly as it needs to be now. Read again, slowly. That's it. Not almost everything, not when it gets better. All. Exactly. No error, no fine-tuning, no correction. As it needs to be. Not how you would like, not as you planned, but how is it? Now. Not later. Not when you understand. Now. Notice what happens when you don't argue with the sentence, when you don't try to agree or disagree, when you just let it pass through. Something comes loose. Maybe it's subtle. Maybe it will be immediate. Maybe it comes as an involuntary sigh. This phrase does not state that everything is perfect. She does not deny pain, problems, or challenges. She does something different and much deeper. It removes you from the internal war. Most of the time, we are in resistance. Against the moment, against the emotional state, against what we feel. Even when nothing is wrong, there is an underlying tension saying, this should be different. And this silent resistance consumes energy, more than any external problem. When you hear, everything is exactly as it needs to be right now, the body receives a rare message. There's nothing to fix right now. And the body understands this as security. Not security in the sense of future guarantee, but safety in the now. And when the body feels safe, the emotional system shifts gears. Anxiety loses fuel. The rush lessens. The mood rearranges itself. Not because life has changed, but because the relationship with the moment has changed. This sentence acts like water, doesn't confront, doesn't push, doesn't demand. She gets around it. She doesn't say everything will be fine. She says something harder and more liberating. It's well enough for you to stop fighting. And that's why she changes her mood from 0 to 100. Because the mood doesn't change when you solve everything. It changes when you stop resisting. Now something important, and here's the point that almost no one realizes. This phrase is not to be repeated all day long. It is not a mechanical mantra. It loses strength if it becomes noise. It works when it appears as a reminder, not as an imposition. Said once, at the right time, it adjusts more than 100 control attempts. And now, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. And this is the part where you'll probably feel like responding in the comments. What did your body feel when you heard that phrase for the first time? Was it relief, resistance, silence, unexpected emotion? Don't think too much. The first feeling is usually the most honest. And the question for the next block is even more curious. If this phrase changes everything inside in seconds, why do we forget it so much? Easily when life gets tough. If the phrase is so simple, why does it disappear from our memory precisely when it is most do we need it? The answer lies in the pace at which we live. Modern life doesn't give us space to feel. It pushes us to react, respond to messages quickly, make decisions without pause, produce, resolve, advance. In this accelerated flow, the body goes into defense mode. And when we are on defense, everything becomes a threat. A delay turns into irritation. Silence turns into anxiety. A small mistake turns into a huge burden. It is exactly in these moments that we forget the phrase. Not because it no longer works, but because the mind takes complete control. The mind wants to act. The body wants security. When the pressure builds, we do what we've learned. We try to control the future, anticipate scenarios, correct what hasn't even happened yet, and that takes us away from the now. The phrase was not made for when everything is calm. It was made for the exact moment when you realize you are fighting the moment. In traffic, before a difficult conversation, when something goes according to plan, when anxiety hits without warning. It does not solve the external situation. It changes the internal starting point. Saying, or remembering, everything is exactly as it needs to be now, is not giving up. It's realignment. It's like stopping paddling against the current for a few seconds. Not to abandon the path, but to catch your breath. When you use the phrase in this context, something practical happens. The body slows down enough for you to act better. The response is no longer automatic. Emotion stops ruling alone. Clarity reappears. Many people believe that they can only calm down after everything is resolved. But the real order is reversed. Things start to sort themselves out when you calm down first. Not because the world obeys you, but because you start to see little things that were previously invisible. The phrase works as a return to center button. It reminds us of something we forget all the time. The present moment is not a mistake. He is just what he is. And when you stop treating now as the enemy, energy expenditure decreases drastically. You still act, still decide. It still faces challenges. But without the extra tension of thinking everything is wrong. There is an important detail in the application of this phrase. It should not be used to escape reality, but to enter it completely. Saying everything is exactly as it needs to be now does not mean accepting abuse, stagnation, or injustice. It means accepting the current point as a starting point, not as a failure. It's the difference between saying, "This shouldn't be happening," and "This is happening. How do I respond from here?" The second option returns power. The first drains energy. The more you practice this return to the now, the faster the body recognizes the path. At first you forget, then remember late, then remember in the middle, until one day he remembers before. And that is the true effect of the phrase. It doesn't change the world. It changes the internal timing. But then an inevitable question arises, and perhaps the most important of all. If this sentence returns us to the center with so much precision, why do we insist so much on living apart from it? That's what we're going to touch on in the next block. There is a rare and profoundly transformative moment when you realize that you don't need to add anything to feel whole. Just remove the excess. Much of our emotional exhaustion does not come from what happens, but from the invisible accumulation of resistance. Expectations not met, repeated thoughts, constant attempts to forcefully adjust reality. All of this weighs, and we almost never realize how much. When the phrase returns to consciousness, everything is exactly as it needs to be now. It doesn't bring anything new. It removes urgency, remove the charge. It removes the idea that you are behind in life. This process is a form of silent purification, not in the sense of erasing emotions, but to let them pass without settling. Think of a glass of cloudy water. If you try to clean it by stirring more, the water only gets messier. But if you leave the glass undisturbed, the dirt settles on its own. The same happens internally. When you stop interfering all the time, the mind slows down, emotions reorganize, the center reappears. This center is not a distant place. It doesn't need to be conquered. It is always there, just hidden. We live as if we were permanently out of place, as if there was a sweet spot in the future where everything would finally make sense. And in this search, we ignore the only space where something can really happen, now. Returning to the center is not a mystical event. It's an internal posture adjustment. This is when you stop leaning forward all the time, when you release the weight from your shoulders, when breathing finds a natural rhythm. In this state, something curious happens. Silence stops being uncomfortable. The pause stops scaring. You don't feel an immediate need to fill the void, and it is in this void that clarity arises, not as a ready answer, but like smooth driving. Many wrong decisions are born from internal misalignment, in a hurry, from anxiety, from the fear of standing still. When you return to the center, the choices change in quality. You act less by reaction and more by perception. This doesn't mean life gets easy. It means it becomes habitable. There is a huge difference between living in a state of continuous tension and live in a state of presence. In the first, any problem becomes a threat. In the second, problems become movements to be crossed. The phrase does not eliminate challenges. It changes the emotional ground you walk on, and the more often you return to that center, less time is lost outside of it. The body learns, the mind trusts, the rhythm adjusts, and then a silent, almost inevitable question arises. Who would you be if you lived most of your time in this state of alignment? What kind of decisions would you make? What conflicts would cease to exist simply because you would no longer be in war with yourself? This question does not require an immediate answer. It calls for contemplation. And it is exactly with this contemplation that we reach the last block. Perhaps the biggest mistake we learn about life is believing that it needs to be defeated, as if every day was an obstacle, as if the present were just a means to get somewhere else. But what if now wasn't a mistake? What if there was nothing out of place right now? When you look back, you realize that many of the moments that shaped you the most were planned. They just happened. And, even the difficult ones, they brought something that could only born from there. The phrase that ran through this video does not promise eternal comfort. She offers something rarer, emotional truth. Everything is exactly as it needs to be now. Not as an optimistic statement, but as an invitation to conscious surrender. Surrender not as giving up, but how to cease the internal struggle that never brought peace. When you stop resisting the moment, something curious happens. Life starts moving again, not in a straight line, not in a predictable way, but with fluidity. You stop pushing the river and starts browsing. This does not make you passive, makes you precise. From that place, you feel when it's time to act and when it's time to wait, when to speak and when to mute, when to insist and when to release. This discernment does not come from effort. It is born from alignment. You may realize that many conflicts don't need to be resolved, just understood, that many pains do not call for combat. They ask for presence, that many answers come on their own when you stop pressing for them. The phrase doesn't change who you are. It removes the noise that made you forget, and little by little you begin to recognize a subtle pattern. The more you accept the now, less now hurts you. This isn't magic. It's intimacy with reality. Now, before I close, I want to leave you with something that is not a conclusion, but a portal. Sign up and continue walking with us along the path of the soul. Here, we don't look for ready-made answers. We cultivate listening. And take this question with you, without rushing to answer. And if what we call destiny is not something that awaits us in the future, but the silent whisper that has always accompanied us, just waiting for us to stop resisting and finally listen, stick with it. The invisible continues speaking.